The city of Cleveland had just begun booming. As populations rose and the steel industry began to take off, the once quiet town was seeing growth like it had never seen before. And right off the heel of the Great Depression, people were seeing good times for what seemed like the first time in ages. This, however, is not the story we're here to tell today. Despite the booming growth of Millionaire's Row, a section of Cleveland home to its richest residents, there were still slums all around, and poverty was rampant in other parts of the city. It was there, in a part of the city east of Kingsbury Run, between Hobo Jungle and the Roaring Third, is where our grim tale begins. This is the story of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, also known as the Cleveland Torso Murderer. Now, let me start off by saying no murderer was ever apprehended for these crimes, and to be honest, no one is even really certain how many victims there truly were. Some believe there were as little as 12. Others believe that there were as many as 20 bodies. But the most harrowing fact is that only 3 of the bodies were ever identified. On September 5th, 1934, a young man found the first victim on the shores of Lake Erie. The woman was never identified and was referred to as the Lady of the Lake. She was decapitated and amputated at the knees. At the time, it was investigated as a murder, but would later be dubbed Victim Number 0 and would mark the beginning of the case of the Cleveland Torso Murderer. Her body had been covered in some sort of chemical that would later be determined as lime chloride, something investigators think the killer meant to use to decompose the body, but instead it helped preserve it. Over a year later, on September 23, 1935, 2 teenagers discovered a decapitated, emasculated corpse at the base of Jackass Hill. The body was naked except for a pair of socks and drained of any blood. The body was identified as Edward Andrassy, one of the few to ever be identified. On the same day, another body was found on Jackass Hill, an unidentified body with a similar emasculated and decapitated motif, but treated with the same chemical agent as the Lady in the Lake. The body was originally estimated to have been dead between 7 to 10 days, but upon further investigation, that was revised to being anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks. With 2 bodies being discovered and similar themes on hand, the police began suspecting that they had a serial killer on their hands. On January 26, 1936, the next body was discovered. A woman by the name of Florence Polillo. She was found decapitated, dismembered, and wrapped in newspaper hidden away in some baskets. Autopsies show that the cause of death was a slit throat. 10 days later, on February 7th, her limbs were recovered, except for the head, which was never found. On June 5th, 1936, another body was found, this one dubbed the Tattooed Man. He was named as such due to the 6 distinctive tattoos on the body. The autopsy stated that the body was drained of blood like the rest, but his head was severed while the victim was still alive. This body was discovered right outside the Nickel Plate Railroad police building, and the head was casted and put on display in hopes that it would help identify the man. The attempt was fruitless, as the tattooed man was still never identified. Then, on July 22nd, a young girl came across the decapitated remains of a man. The body had been dead for nearly 2 months, and his head and clothing were all found nearby. The police identified, through the large amounts of blood that had seeped into the ground, that he had been killed there. An autopsy showed that he had been dismembered while still alive. Despite his entire body being recovered, his corpse was so badly decayed that no fingerprints were retrieved, and any attempts to identify him failed. The victim was never identified. 2 months later, on September 10th, 2 halves of a torso and legs were found by the creek in Kingsbury Run, as a man tripped over them. Here is where investigators found out the first piece of information about the killer. From this body, the coroner noted that the body had been cut in a surgical manner, clearly by somebody who had knowledge of the human anatomy. Though the cause of death was decapitation, it was done in one confident strike, severing the head instantaneously. The police conducted the grim investigation among a crowd of onlookers, and some theorize that the killer may have been in the crowd, watching along. The killings went quiet for a while, or so it would seem. Were they over? Unfortunately not. In February 23, 1937, the upper torso of a woman was found by Lake Erie, where the Lady of the Lake was first found. Unlike the other bodies, this one had been decapitated after death. The limbs and head were never located, possibly because they sunk to the bottom of the lake, but roughly about 3 months later, her lower torso washed ashore. The woman was identified to be in her mid-20s, and nothing more about her is known. On June 6, 1937, a boy walking along the Lorraine-Carnegie Bridge discovered a human skull and bag containing human remains. Through dental records, the body was identified as Rose Wallace, but the identification was never confirmed, and we can only assume it was the correct person. The police followed up with every lead they could coming from Rose. Every single one came up a dead end, and they were no closer to finding the killer. This would be the last identified body. The next month, on July 6th, another body was found. First, the leg from a patrol officer on a tugboat. Following investigations found the torso in a chicken feed bag, and the body had been gutted and its heart had been removed. The man, only identified to be in his late 30s, was never identified. His organs and head were never found. The next body wasn't discovered until the following year, April 8th, 1938. A woman's leg was discovered floating in the river. When the river was searched, a burlap sack containing the victim's headless torso, cut in two, a thigh, and a left foot were found. The body was detected to have traces of morphine found in it. Whether that was applied by the killer to subdue the victim, or if she was an addict, was never determined. She was never identified, and the rest of her remains never found. The next victim was a contentious one. On August 16, 1938, the body of a decapitated female was found. The head was removed, but the body was found to have been embalmed. The lead detective dismissed it as one of the torso murderer's victims in his memoirs due to the embalming, as no other bodies have been embalmed. The final body was found later that day by the lakeshore dump. The body was disarticulated with the same precision as the other torso murder victims, but the body was so badly decayed, it was impossible to determine the cause of death, or identify the victim. All in all, the body had been dead for about 7 to 9 months. And that's all the victims of the torso murderer, or the major ones attributed to the serial killings at least. There were several other bodies found in similar motifs, but not canonically identified as belonging to the serial murderer. The first of which was the headless body of a man found in a boxcar in Pennsylvania. The injuries were similar, but it was found so far away that there couldn't have been a connection. However, Detective Peter Merylow was convinced that there was a connection since there was a train that connected the two cities. Next was the body of Robert Robertson. Police found his body decapitated in a business in Cleveland, and although the killing had a similar means to the other decapitation murders, the police treated it as an isolated crime. Finally, in 1939, someone claiming to be the torso killer claimed to have killed a victim in LA, but investigations only found animal bones. In all this time, over 9,000 people were interrogated. At the head of the investigation were detectives Orley May, Emil Musil, Peter Merylow, and Martin Zaleski. But one name we cannot ignore from the police force is Elliot Ness. Famous for bringing down Al Capone, he is often given a lot of credit for the torso murder investigations. The last two bodies were found in plain view of Ness's office in City Hall. During the chaos, Ness led a police raid in the homeless camps. 11 squad cars, 2 police vans, and 3 fire trucks were deployed to ransack the shantytowns, detaining 63 men, and eventually burning the entire homeless town to the ground. The press obviously lashed out at this, as it caused panic and led to no actual leads, but it did mark an end to the murders. As for the suspects, there were only 2 notable suspects. One was a man brought in by the county sheriff, a man by the name of Frank Dolezal. He had been brought in for the murder of Flo Polillo, whom Dolezal had lived with for a while. Further investigations revealed that he had known Edward Andrassy and Rose Wallace. After a long night of questioning and being held in his cell, he confessed to the murders, but it was not admitted, as his confessions were a mess of incoherent ramblings and hyperspecific details, almost as if he had been fed lines to say. Before he could even go on trial, Dolezal hanged himself in his cell, but a further autopsy showed that he had sustained 6 broken ribs, all while under the sheriff's custody. Dolezal was posthumously exonerated for the crime. The second was a man named Francis E. Sweeney. Sweeney was a World War I medic with a specialty in amputation in the field. Sweeney suffered from alcoholism as well as PTSD from the war. Elliot Ness personally oversaw the interrogations, during which Sweeney was said to have failed 2 very important polygraph tests. These machines are now deemed extremely unreliable. Ness was sure he had his man, but the circumstantial evidence had little bearing, and little concrete evidence was there to pin Sweeney as the murderer, so they never booked him. Sweeney then harassed Ness for hounding him as the killer, sending him goading postcards until his death. Sadly, even if they did have anything concrete on him, chances of prosecution were unlikely, as he was the cousin of one of Ness's political opponents. Another theory proposed by Peter Milo was that the torso killer was a vagrant using the train lines to travel between states, thus evading authorities and hiding the bodies. Peter Milo went undercover as a hobo to investigate the idea, but came up with nothing. Similarly, as late as 1997, there was a theory that the butcher of Kingsbury Run was actually many different butchers. There were differences in cuts, motifs, and the methods of hiding the bodies. And that's it. That is the grim tale of the butcher of Kingsbury Run, of the Cleveland torso murderer. Was it one surgical killer, dismembering and goading the law enforcement of this post-Great Depression city? Or was it a result of the time, and many violent people copycatting each other's kills and throwing police off? The answer? No one may truly know.